Hey, I'm going to document how you set up turn signals on a Mule. This is a Mule 2500. Still runs pretty good. Need to get the transmission belt changed, CVT belt, but there's your turn signal. There's your turn signal. There's some more turn signals here. There's one in the middle. It's a center brake light. There's another turn signal on the other side. These have been redone to be turn signals, and I'm going to turn them on here. On the dash, we've got a couple controls that'll do the turn signals. I'm going to use the hazard light. This unit's about $15, and the link's below. And this will show you how bright they are. So obviously it's washed out a little bit because I have the exposure turned up, but during ordinary daytime you'd be able to see these. You can see everything's flashing real bright. There's a $64 turn signal kit online. I would advise not buying that. It's from like Western something something. It's on, it'll come up if you Google it on eBay, but I would recommend not getting that because it's about $20 to $30 worth of parts. And it says it has the wiring harness and everything for like $120, which is totally overpriced, completely overpriced. Okay, because you can do this whole thing, wiring and all, for about 40 tops. The kits, this is just a little residue from this 303 I put on there. That's all that is. The kit consists of these amber lights. You'll need 2 amber lights. It comes with 2 red versions of those, but I had these left over and they're much brighter and more visible. So if you can get these are old XK 12 volt driverless. Means they don't need a separate power interface. They can just go right into the power polarized LED. So you got to make sure you observe positive and negative. On these, I'll tell you what the secret is, the secret sauce, if I can figure it out here, because you can barely see the color on these anymore because I painted over them. Okay, so the striped is the ground on these. The regular one is the power. And then this is just a indicator, 12 to 24 volt indicator lamp from a military surplus, not for export. But you could use any weatherproof LED. You want to stick with LEDs because we're going to use a lot of diodes to flush this kit out. One diode that you'll need, and these diodes are about $2 for a pack of 2 dozen of them from China. Okay, so you got to wait for the slow boat, but they do get there. I haven't bundled the wiring up. I've taken the glove box off here to finish it last night, and I didn't put it back in because I wanted to get a shot of what it looks like in there. It may seem a little daunting at first. You'll want that diode because this kit stipulates that your stoplight switch should feed into this, and that's how it knows. Like if you brake and turn, it'll brake your other lights but flash the light that's turning or flash the side that's turning. So this becomes this is going to be the way that your system interacts with your rear lights, your brake light filament on your LED lamps. I know it's not a filament, but the brake light circuit, the brighter of the two. So on the original Mule wiring, and I'll link to the schematic below, you've got a brake light wire power that comes up through the bed to a switch. It's a brown and blue pair down in here. It's right there behind the pedal. Let's see if I can put the light on it. There we go. That's some new conduit I ran, but the old one for the brake light, you can see it. The brake switch, where is that puppy? It's right there. so you can put eyes on it. It's hard because I don't want to use the flash on the camera. Alright, so can I turn the exposure down? Maybe I could do it while I'm shooting. That'd be nice, right? Seems like I can. Alright, so that's right there. There's your brown and blue that goes up to the brake light. Now I've rewired that. It goes up to the brake light switch. The brown is still going up to the brake light switch, but the blue goes off, and there's a diode in there. And the diode it looks like it's going to get crowded in there and maybe tromped on, but if you notice how the pedals are arranged, you won't step on these, even though they're where they are. Your feet just don't go up in here. And there's a diode in where my finger's pointing, and then there's a lead, this one I think on the left, yeah, that goes up to the turn signal system. So you can see it transitions from blue to red, the red wire that comes down from the turn signal kit. So you'll see that on the schematic here. I'll pull the schematic up. Schematic. You've got a red wire here. Let's see if I can get the exposure value correct again. Got a red wire here that comes from your stoplight switch. That's power when you press the brake pedal, and that goes up to your control. So if you were going to do a really simple setup of this, I would advise that you notice in here, really simple setup, like you don't want to add any additional lights to your Mule or anything. Then when you set this up, there's going to be a brown wire, which is actually your power. If you look at the brown is used for plus 12 volts. Stop blinking. I wonder if I hit the hazard button. I did. Okay, so the brown wire comes up from below, headed towards the switch, goes to the switch. The blue wire returns from the foot pedal switch. On mine, the spring was missing for the brake, so I had to go find a spring that would work. I'm trying to get the light and everything. Unfortunately, there's a lot of shadows and shit in the way. So, alright. Yes, I'm going to say the S word sometimes, and if you're a Puritan from 1815, you can go fuck off. You don't need to be in my video. So, good people pretend defensive about words. That's just fucking censorship. That's all it is. Anyway, so we've got all this kind of crazy wiring here. If you want to really simplify it, take your blue wire, right, and send it up to the red wire on that turn signal kit. But what do you do with the blue wire that goes back to your brake lights? My advice is to run one additional wire to the back. You should do it inside a conduit if you can, like I've done here. This black conduit is new that I'm pointing to. Run an additional wire back through. It's really easy to get a bundle of wires through this stick up here, down through. There's a conduit that runs underneath the center line and comes out the back. I'll flip up the bed so you can see that. Okay. Those are my crinkly rear flaps. So it runs through here and it pops up down underneath. Okay, I built this box, but it's down underneath, and then you can, from the underside, you can run it up. It's easy, kind of easier to see if I flip the seat down. Right about there behind the seat pivot, and then that runs underneath this box along the existing channel and then pops up over here, and then you can wire it into your stuff. You need one additional wire to run from there to here and then continue along here. Okay, this is the simplest wiring setup to get brake turn hazards to work. with your existing brake system. You run an additional wire. In fact, you can see this orange wire. I suggest orange because the turn signal kit uses orange for the left rear. And just run it along here. Just run it along here. And then you'll see where you've got 3 wires that patch in to your brake. Okay, so your stop, your low intensity lights, and your ground. So you've got 3 leads because you've got a common ground, and you've got high and then a low. You want to run this in here. Just take a semi-sharp object, not a sharp object, like a Phillips screwdriver would probably work, and dig your way in here and make a hole and then run it in there and then wrap it up so this boot is still functional. So as water hits this boot, it runs off the boot and gives you a drip line. Now you've got 4 wires. So you've got a common ground. Try to zoom in on that. You've got a common ground, which is this black with yellow. That's a very common wire used for ground in this system. Then you've got a wire that is just black. Okay, that is your parking brake. Not your parking. Yeah, that's your parking lights. I'm sorry, that's your low lights. Okay, so black is your low, 12 volts, and blue is your high. This additional wire we're running is for an additional high, so we can independently control the highs on the rear stop lights. So we're going to use the orange for the left one and the blue for the right one. So down here in this bundle, this is OEM wiring, by the way, you split this bundle open and you'll find a place where there's 2 blues from the lights and it comes into 1 blue. So you want to figure out which blue is the left and hook that to the orange and then leave the other blue connected. And then wrap it all back up, and I'll re-electrical tape that later. So that way, your turn signal brake system can independently control the rear lights, and I highly suggest switching to 1157 LED lamps here. We use LEDs throughout the whole system. Although with that basic setup, it's not required. You could use regular incandescent bulbs. They would work. Because there's no diodes involved. There's no fancy semiconductor electronics involved in the system yet. And that will give you the basic setup. That won't give you, what it won't give you is a center stoplight up here. You need more wiring for that, for a center stop. Essentially what you'd need to do is you need to have 2 positive wires, okay, running back here. And remember, the orange wire is controlled by the left rear output on here. We'll have another one that, instead of taking your blue wire from the switch and running it exclusively up to the red wire on the turn signal, run the blue wire to the red wire and also run it to another wire down here. Okay, so you can yeah, you'll need an additional wire because you're using your existing blue wire run for the right rear. You're using your orange for the left rear, and then you need another one that comes off of that T for the center lamp. Now when you run the center lamp, obviously it's going to pop out over here, okay? That's why you run like 4 wires at once, and you get all your color codes figured out in advance. And it pops out over here. Well, how do you get it to that center? What I did is, I gotta remember how I did it. Okay, so you'll notice that there's wiring that runs along here, along this channel, right? You'll run, that's this conduit I ran here. This is for the center and for those turns you saw on the top, the turn signals on the upper posts. It runs, it continues, you'll see at a point it gets into a junction. I'm hopping over that junction, I'm zip tying it to this bar, I'm continuing it, and it seems to terminate here, but it really doesn't. What it does is, They're very thin wires that I ran in here, like probably, I don't know, 20 gauge, 22 gauge. And it ran in, you pull this boot off, which is the air intake, and you run the wires up and you run them up through here. Now what you actually do is you feed just an ordinary fish tape roll up in here and you pull the wires down out through here. And so you go up here with the fish tape, up here, and the fish tape will end up in this air inlet box. Now these are small enough wires, they're not going to obstruct the air intake, so you can do this, and then you run them out through this little corner here, and you've got your thing. Now you run more wires so that you can also have a lighter outlet here that's dropped down so you can run your hood or the orange rotating safety light, or charge your phone or whatever you want. You have the option of running this off a constant 12 volts or off a switched. I have it unswitched, so you have to have the switch on in order for this to work. It makes sense. You turn the switch on, the orange rotating light comes on. I would suggest if you're going to do stuff like phone charging to put one of these dual 12 volt receptacles in the glove box. They're about $10 on Amazon. And put it up underneath the top, so as the rain comes down, water comes down, snow gets packed in there, it doesn't get into the receptacles, even though they have this rubber cover. And that keeps them from rusting. And then then there's power right next to the glove box that you can run those to, constant 12 volt accessory power. So, so you run your additional wire minimally, or two if you've got the cigarette lighter receptacle in mind, and you run it in the pipe. It's running up here, it's coming out, and then you just ground this. I've grounded it to this bolt. You can see I've removed and reattached it. It's the same original bolt, and here you go. There's the ground for that light, and here's the power for it. I know it looks kind of wonky, but the thin wire comes in, it connects to the power for the light and goes in through the grate. In this case, when you hook it up, make sure you're not tweaking that against the grate and shorten it to ground. So there, now you've got the left and right lights operate independently as both brake and turn and hazard. And of course the low running light. And then you've got a center brake light. If this thing will focus, you've got a center brake light right there. You don't have these two column brake lights, but if you run additional wire, I just use some thin gauge speaker wire, but you could use whatever you want. You don't need big wire because these don't draw a lot of power. You run here, you can see the speaker wire I ran, just the gold and silver color, copper and silver color off the shelf. Just one lead goes over to here, and then it's grounded against the frame, and then the other lead goes to the other side, and then you tee those into the orange and blue wires that go to the back lower left and lower right brake. So I can zoom in. Oof. Brake and sorry about the focus. The brake and the you call it the hazard, the flashers. So basically the high intensity. So you got the orange and blue as your high intensity, and you just tee them off right there. Okay. And now you've got basically the full setup that you see here. I've gone a lot farther with this. So I'm going to put the fish in. A couple things I recommend is I don't think this unit comes with rear flaps for the tires, so you're going to have to come up with some kind of flap to prevent sticks and stuff from hitting your wiring on the back of your light, because these were all tore up when I got to it. I just used some aluminum flashing, some short lags, and some wood. And I'll give you a quick shot of how I cut it underneath. Let's see if it'll focus here. It's all caked with mud, but you can see there's a piece of wood, and it's form cut to the shape of this upper squarish flap. And then this lag goes all the way through the aluminum and the wood really gives the support to this. And it'll crinkle when you lift the bed up like that, but you should come up with different solutions. But that keeps it out, because because you're rolling forward, so you don't want something soft like this because it'll get caught up and worn out in the tire. The soft side, see, it's striking the tire right now, but that doesn't really matter because as you roll, well, it's close to it anyway, but as you roll forward, that flap is insignificant, but you don't want the same kind of setup back here. And then, what else? Yeah, that stops you from tearing up them wires. For the front turn signals, all you want to do, and all we've done so far is we've bought some of that split conduit, and we bought some wire, and we've bought these lights here. We've bought the blinker here and a fuse. These are like $2 or $3 online, these solid state blinkers. Now what I tell you is once you get them, use something like spray acrylic or something with a mastic to seal the bottom of these, because these 3-pin flashers are not waterproof. And yeah, so there's a fuse in here, basically, so you've got now you can have your choice. I wanted the hazards to work when the unit was completely off because they draw so little power. Just LEDs flashing draws like 1/10 of an amp. So I've wired the power for the blinker. So the blinker has a B terminal on it. Wire that into, where did I wire that into? That's the accessory, I think. Yeah. No, that's the turn signal system. So I use the top fuse here. And what I did is I just, sorry about the focus again and the zoom, I'm going to fix this here. Okay, so I use this, and again the lighting too, it's hard to use a headlight in a phone. These fucking kimchi phones are terrible. And then you've got your top fuse here. This is a constant on, so you can see where it's located. You pop open the fuse box and you can solder another wire in there and slightly open the end of this a little bit more to get that second wire out. And you want it on the right hand side so it's fused, because this is the input from the battery, and this is for your turn signal. Okay, so that's your turn signal power to your clicker down there, to your blinker module. And then you do need to, speaking of running other lines up underneath, so we have the existing blue high beam. We've added an orange high beam for the left rear, so we can differentiate the two. We've added a, let's just say, red for the center light, center brake light that comes off the brake light switch. And then we need a couple more wires, right? Because we need the blink signal that's coming from the blinker to go to the front. Now on the diagram on that box, it says 2 wires go to the blinker, and you're supposed to ground it. Don't ground it. Don't use the blue wire. Okay, just use the black wire. So the output of this, where it says L for load, this needs to be grounded. So this has a lead coming from it that just goes to a ground right here. You'll see there's an existing ground. I think this is the ground here, but there's an existing one. Just reuse the same ground, chassis ground, and then the output of this is a black wire. That's going to run along that same orange, blue, red wire combination. So you got 4 wires now running through this conduit to the front. This is the conduit here. Okay? And that black wire will run up through here and connect up in the back with the black wire that comes off of here. So that gives you the potential for blink, but you've got to ground it. So what you're doing when you're going like this is you're sending it off to different circuits to blink. You're grounding it in different ways, and it's causing different lights to blink to get power. That's how this unit works. The extra blue wire is for illumination of this, and I don't think that'll work unless your load is very high, unless you're using 1157 lamps on the back. They create enough load to cause this to illuminate, then you'd have to change the wiring and possibly use the original. But since I used LEDs, they don't draw enough current to cause this little lamp that's in here to light up. So the blue wire that comes off of this you don't use. The black is the feed, and then the red is the is to tell it that you're pressing the brake pedal. That's a 12 volt that's on when you're pressing the brake pedal, and the other 4 wires go off to activate there's a green and yellow for the right and left front, and then there's an orange and a brown for the rear. Okay, so that'll give you basic turn kit stuff. I'm sorry about the camera quality. It's what it is. You know, kimchi phone and headlights, what I got. So if you have any questions, post them below. I'll try to answer them. That'll give you basic turn signal. This won't light up, but you'll hear it click, and you'll see the light blinking. I mean, you can't really see this indicator necessarily when you're driving. I guess you could. So you could, if you wanted to, you know, put an additional indicator in the circuit with some diodes and then put it on the dash, you know, for like turn signal indicators or something. But that's like way beyond the scope of this tutorial. I'll just go over a couple other things I've added. When you pull the brake up, nothing's happening, right? Well, if you flip the switch down, you've got an indicator on the dash that flashes to tell you. It's not real bright on here because I'm shining a light on it, but if I pull the switch up properly, there we go. That is a problem, is they use a leaf spring switch in here, but it's like very, you'll see it's like they had the retard engineer design it at Kawasaki. So you might want to actually put a real leaf spring switch underneath that boot. And what that does is it grounds out a red lead that runs up underneath here to a wiring harness. So I'm not going to go over that whole thing here, but basically you pull this up, it's causing that to flash. It also causes your hazards to flash, because think about it, you're driving, you put the parking brake on, you turn on your hazards, you get out of the vehicle. Well, why have that extra step of turning on your hazards? So I added that. So that's something potentially you can do. I'm going to flip it up to the neutral position and it won't do anything. Now this is with the vehicle off. If you flip it up, you got to have the vehicle on. The same thing happens, but you got to have the vehicle on in order for that system to work. And if you turn it to the center point, only that will flash on the dash to tell you that your light's on. So for the front turn signals, I use some good quality speaker wire. You'll see how there's a wire that pops out for the headlights. You just need to unbolt underneath. There's a big bolt there, there's a big bolt there. When you unbolt them both, this will pop up. And then you still need to go around and loosen this. You need to take all these screws out, and you need to disconnect it from this. There's clips underneath. And anyway, you have to go all the way around and do that. And you might have to take this off here. There's two screws, and there might be some screws behind this. I don't remember. You can leave that panel on. You can see the horn wiring underneath. If you take this up, you should be able to see the horn wiring over there, and there is a clamp. And if you're taking this off to do the front and left turn signals, you might as well put the horn on. You'll see that there's a mount point here and a mount point here up underneath with a little divot to hold the horn in place. You could actually have two horns with two different tones if you wanted. So the horn does work on here. Okay, the wiring's already installed for the horn. You just need a switch and a horn. That's it. So run your speaker wire basically underneath here. You're going to run it back over here. From here, you're going to run it back over here, and then you're going to ground it somehow. You could ground them up here if you wanted to, but I did the grounds back here, and then there's your yellow and your green for your left and right respectively, and that's what this is for. So now you've got front turn signals as well. You've got hazards that work. You've got a brake light system that integrates with the flashers. So if you brake, everything in here goes on solid and you're doing a left turn, okay, that's going to flash and that's going to flash. But these other ones, this one, and this one, are on high beam solid, while these flash high beam on the left hand side. And that's how that works. So you should be able to wire up one of these things onto your Mule and give yourself turn signals. And like I said, the horn is a no-brainer. Take the glove box out to make it easy on yourself. What other tips? You just need some wire and some conduit to run underneath the center line, run up and hook up all the wiring. and you're done. That's it. You've got turn signals, a horn. The thing is essentially street legal. These are about 25 bucks for a pair. You get them, there's a nut on the inside so you can rotate the mirrors before you put them on. And you've got rear view mirrors. What else do you need? Most states that makes it street legal. You just need your tags. You already got seat belts. You might have to wear goggles if you don't have a windshield like this one does. Doesn't. That's it.